What if a single unsealed voice memo could change how an entire legal battle is understood? In recent days, a leaked audio recording has pushed the conflict surrounding Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni, and It Ends With Us into a far more complicated light. What initially appeared to be a straightforward set of allegations is now layered with media headlines, private conversations, and growing questions about what was said and what was left out. As outlets like People magazine, The New York Post, and Daily Mail amplified fragments of this voice message, public focus narrowed to one phrase, talking to you as a friend. But when pulled out of context, even a friendly tone can become part of a much larger public narrative. Behind the headlines sits a network of text messages, documents, and evidence that suggest the situation may be far more complex than it first appeared. This documentary-style breakdown examines what unfolded behind the scenes, from disputed claims and contradictions to shifting public perception and the growing tension between private intent and public interpretation. As more material becomes unsealed, one question remains: are we witnessing clarity or just another carefully shaped narrative? The moment the voice memo was unsealed, the tone of this entire situation changed. What had previously unfolded through court filings and secondhand accounts suddenly became more immediate, more personal, and far more vulnerable. The audio recording, purportedly sent before filming on It Ends With Us began, placed Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni in a context that felt markedly different from the hardened positions later outlined in the lawsuit. In the recording, the voice message is calm, intimate, and conversational. Much of the media response, however, focused on a single framing, that Lively was talking to you as a friend. Once that phrase entered the news cycle, it quickly became the anchor point for multiple media headlines, shaping how audiences interpreted the entire exchange. Publications including People magazine, The New York Post, and Daily Mail highlighted the friendliness of the tone, often without lingering on the broader emotional context surrounding the message. This shift matters because when private conversations are filtered through selective quotation, they can dramatically alter public perception. A message that may have been intended as reassurance or vulnerability can be reframed as evidence of inconsistency or manipulation, depending on how it is presented. As the leaked audio circulated, commentary moved away from nuance and toward implication, suggesting that tone alone could invalidate later claims. Yet tone is not evidence. What the unsealed memo introduced was not resolution, but complexity. It raised questions about timing, intent, and how much weight a single audio recording should carry when separated from surrounding documents, text messages, and corroborating evidence. The rapid amplification of select excerpts created a simplified narrative, one that favored immediacy over examination. As attention narrowed on the memo itself, a larger issue began to surface: whether the media's emphasis on presentation over substance was obscuring rather than clarifying the facts. And as this focus intensified, it set the stage for deeper scrutiny, not just of what was said, but of how the story itself was being shaped in real time. As attention moved beyond the voice memo, scrutiny began to shift toward the role of Don Saladino, the personal trainer at the center of one of the most disputed claims. Saladino had a long-standing professional relationship with Blake Lively and Reynolds, training both for years and frequently appearing alongside them on Instagram as part of his public brand. At Lively's suggestion, Justin Baldoni also began working with him while preparing for It Ends With Us. In professional training relationships, trust is fundamental. Clients routinely share personal information, physical limitations, medical concerns, and private anxieties with the expectation of confidentiality. According to later testimony, Baldoni contacted Saladino privately to ask about Lively's weight, citing concerns related to his own back injury, including bulging discs and chronic pain. The stated purpose was preparation and safety, not commentary on appearance. What followed is where the narrative fractures. Saladino later described feeling uncomfortable with the inquiry and chose to relay the information to Lively. That decision, sharing a private conversation without consent, became a turning point. Critics questioned what practical benefit could come from disclosing the exchange, especially when it risked inflaming tensions between cast members and escalating conflict behind the scenes. Context matters here. Saladino's professional world is closely tied to celebrity proximity. His training programs, fitness retreats, and online communities often relied on association with high-profile clients. Public displays of loyalty toward celebrities can translate into credibility, visibility, and commercial value. In that light, some observers began to question whether the disclosure reflected ethical concern or a deeper alignment driven by celebrity worship and influence. Further complicating the picture were resurfaced Reddit posts from individuals who had participated in Saladino's paid programs years earlier. These accounts, predating the legal dispute, described environments that felt increasingly cult-like, marked by unquestioned authority, social pressure, and abrupt exclusion when concerns were raised. While anecdotal, these stories added another layer to the discussion about power dynamics and control. Rather than clarifying events, the trainer's involvement introduced ambiguity, blurring lines between professionalism, allegiance, and personal judgment. And as this ambiguity grew, so did questions about whether trust had been broken in ways that would ripple far beyond a single phone call. At the center of the legal dispute sits one of the most serious accusations: fat shaming. In her complaint, Blake Lively alleges that Justin Baldoni continued to degrade her by criticizing her body and weight, particularly in the period shortly after she had given birth. The lawsuit claims that Baldoni contacted her personal trainer without her knowledge or permission and implied a desire for her to lose weight within a limited time frame, an allegation that dramatically reshaped public interpretation of earlier events. The claim hinges on intent. According to the filing, the call was framed as unnecessary and humiliating, especially given Lively's postpartum recovery. However, Baldoni's account, later reflected in deposition materials, presents a different explanation. He maintains that the inquiry was motivated by physical limitation, citing long-standing back injuries, including multiple bulging discs and ongoing chronic pain. From this perspective, the question of weight was not aesthetic, but logistical, a matter of safety for both actors during filming. This distinction is critical. In physically demanding scenes, actors often coordinate with trainers, stunt teams, and medical professionals to reduce the risk of injury. Baldoni's explanation suggests an attempt to prepare responsibly rather than to exert pressure or shame. Importantly, there is no documented evidence showing he asked for weight loss, nor any record supporting a demand tied to a specific deadline. The lawsuit further asserts that there was no reason for such a concern because no lifting was required in the film. That assertion would later become a focal point of dispute, but even before examining the script itself, the allegation raised broader questions about how confidential inquiries are interpreted once they leave their original context. In public discourse, nuance often collapses under emotionally charged language. Once the term fat shaming entered headlines, it reframed the entire interaction, transforming a disputed professional concern into a moral accusation. Yet accusations rely not only on perception, but on substantiation. As the legal narratives diverged, one issue remained unresolved: whether the claim reflected misconduct or whether it was a recharacterization shaped by hindsight, conflict, and the escalating pressure of a public case. A key pillar of the dispute rests on whether a lifting scene ever existed in It Ends With Us. In legal filings, it is asserted that there was no such moment in the film and therefore no practical reason for Justin Baldoni to inquire about Blake Lively's weight. That claim, however, becomes more complicated when examined against the script itself. Early versions of the screenplay describe an intimate encounter in which the male character physically lifts the female character, pressing her against a wall as their relationship intensifies. While not a choreographed dance sequence, the moment clearly involves lifting, a physical action that carries real-world implications for performers, particularly when one actor has documented back injuries. The distinction between a dramatic lift and a stylized one may seem semantic, but in practical terms, both require preparation and consideration of safety. As development continued, the scene underwent multiple rewrites. Notes from the production process indicate shifts in location, tone, and staging, moving the moment from a bedroom to a kitchen, altering the rhythm of intimacy and reducing physicality. Eventually, the lifting element was removed entirely. According to available materials, this change occurred at Lively's request, after the scene had already been planned and discussed. This timeline matters. If the scene existed during pre-production, then concerns raised in advance would align with standard professional conduct. Only later, once the scene was eliminated, could those concerns be reframed as unnecessary or intrusive. The contradiction lies not in whether the lift appears in the final cut, but in whether it was once part of the story being prepared. Symbolically, the removed moment carried narrative weight. The lift was intended to represent a loss of control and a turning point in the relationship. Its removal altered not just logistics, but meaning. That creative disagreement, documented in production notes, also reflects growing tension over authority and vision on set. When viewed in sequence, the script evolution challenges the assertion that no lifting was ever contemplated. Instead, it suggests a moving target, one where decisions made after the fact reshaped how earlier actions were judged. In that light, the script becomes less a footnote and more a central piece of evidence in understanding how competing narratives took hold. As the controversy unfolded publicly, a separate layer of the story was taking shape behind the scenes, one revealed through a series of text messages involving studio leadership. These exchanges, primarily between producer Alex Sachs and Todd Black of Sony Pictures, offer a glimpse into internal dynamics during the promotion of It Ends With Us. In these messages, Sachs describes private dinners and conversations where Blake Lively appeared to hold significant influence over those around her. Among the names mentioned repeatedly is Brandon Sklenar, a co-star who, according to the texts, had grown close to Lively during production. One message states that Brandon was wrapped around her finger, suggesting not just friendship, but a level of alignment that raised eyebrows among observers reading the exchanges later. The texts also reference Isabella, another cast member described as similarly aligned, though not so obviously. These descriptions, while informal, paint a picture of shifting loyalties, particularly striking given that Justin Baldoni had reportedly believed he shared a strong professional rapport with Brandon during filming. The sudden distance described in later messages added an emotional dimension to what was already a tense situation. Also present in these private gatherings were key figures from Lively's inner circle, including makeup artist Vivian Baker, hairstylist Jennifer, and even Ryan Reynolds' mother. The inclusion of family and close collaborators blurred professional boundaries, reinforcing the perception that influence extended beyond the set and into personal relationships. Additional references in the messages touch on Christy Hall, the film's writer, and Ann Gianetti, another Sony representative, both navigating their own frustrations during the process. Collectively, the tone of the exchanges suggests a production environment marked by manipulation, quiet coordination, and competing narratives, far removed from the polished image presented during press appearances. Rather than discussing filmmaking logistics, the texts focus heavily on interpersonal dynamics, perception management, and emotional positioning. When read together, they raise difficult questions about power, brainwashing, and who truly shaped the atmosphere surrounding the film's release. These messages do not offer direct conclusions, but they do provide context, revealing how alliances formed, how influence circulated, and how one person's version of events could quietly become dominant long before the public ever saw the movie. As additional materials were released, attention turned to a substantial body of evidence. 122 pages of text messages exchanged between Justin Baldoni and members of his team. On the surface, these messages document the strain of promotion, the uncertainty of public response, and attempts to navigate an increasingly hostile media environment. But what stands out most is not what appears in these texts, it's what does not. Throughout the exchanges, there is discussion of amplifying posts and highlighting content that presented Baldoni in a positive light. What is notably absent is any coordination aimed at damaging Blake Lively's reputation. There are no instructions to contact journalists, no plans to leak damaging stories, and no references to pushing narratives that would undermine her standing. In an era where smear campaigns often leave digital footprints, this absence is striking. This silence becomes more pronounced when compared to other moments that could have been exploited. Viral clips, controversial interviews, and public-facing interactions that reflected poorly on Lively circulated widely online during the same period. Yet within the texts, there is no evidence of an effort to capitalize on those moments. If the intent had been retaliation or reputational harm, these omissions raise questions of motive. By contrast, separate disclosures revealed communications involving PR representatives, reporters, and media outlets such as US Weekly, where requests were allegedly made to remove or soften quotes that favored Baldoni. These efforts suggest an active shaping of public perception, though not from the side accused of orchestration. The contrast between action and accusation forms a pattern. One side is alleged to have coordinated a campaign, yet leaves no trace of such behavior in hundreds of messages. The other side's interactions with the press are documented and specific. This imbalance does not resolve the case, but it complicates the prevailing narrative. In legal and media disputes, absence is not proof, but it is data. And when combined with earlier contradictions, evolving timelines, and selective emphasis, it invites a more cautious reading of claims. As the story continues to unfold, the question becomes less about isolated incidents and more about whether the full picture supports the accusations being made or challenges them. When all the evidence is laid out, the unsealed documents, the evolving script, the private text messages, and the shifting narratives, what emerges is not a simple story of heroes and villains, but a complex web of contradictions. Each new disclosure reframes what came before, reminding us how easily public perception can be shaped by selective emphasis rather than full context. This case continues to raise difficult questions about power, influence, and the gap between private intent and public interpretation. What was said behind closed doors often looks very different once filtered through headlines and commentary. And as more material becomes public, it becomes increasingly important to separate allegation from verification and assumption from documented fact. The story surrounding It Ends With Us is still unfolding. More revelations are likely to come, and with them, more opportunities to reassess what we think we know. For those following this case closely, the truth may not lie in any single clip, quote, or claim, but in how all the pieces fit together over time. If you want to stay informed as new information emerges, consider following this ongoing documentary series. Future episodes will continue examining newly released materials, unresolved questions, and the broader implications of how stories like this are told and believed.